Hi, I'm Chris Martenson of Peak Prosperity, and I'm here with your update. So here's what's going on in the world right now. I have just issued an alert at my website, and the alert is around the idea I really don't like what I'm seeing in the markets at this point in time. The alert is saying that there is the possibility of a market crash coming, and the reason I'm saying this is because of what I'm looking at going on globally at this point in time. Now, in case you haven't been following, we're at the desperation cornered animal stage of this particular story. The central banks have tried all kinds of things. They've printed tens of trillions of dollars and shoved them into the markets. They've bailed out the big banks. They've performed quantitative easing, which means buying assets off the market with thin air money. And despite all of this, all they've really achieved up to this point has been a lot of excessive valuations in stocks and bonds and other paper assets. Now, that was their goal. And the goal of the central banks was to herd everybody into risky assets, right? Because what do you get for your savings at the bank? Zero. So when you're getting zero, and you're getting zero on bonds and other safe assets, what do you do? Because you can't live on zero, not when we all know there's still inflation. My goodness, have you seen what healthcare is doing, or the price of a new car, or looked at how much food costs these days? I mean, everything that we really need to begin preparing for, drug costs for elderly people or saving for college, all of these things are going up at 2 to 3 times, sometimes more, the official inflation rate. So getting zero is not an option for a lot of people, particularly elderly people, seniors, people who are close to retirement, who haven't saved enough, who are trying to live on what savings they do have. Zero is unacceptable. So everybody goes over into what are called risk assets. They end up in stocks. They end up in riskier bonds. Junk bonds were at least yielding something, but in June of 2014, junk bonds were yielding 4%, in some cases less than 4%, right? You used to be able to get 4%, 5%, even 6% on 30-day paper from the government. Nothing safer than that, getting 6%. Now you're getting 4% on CCC rated junk debt from these crappy companies. Please. But that's where we were. So everybody's piled over onto the risk side. The only problem with being in risk assets is there can't be any risk in the world, because if there is, you're going to lose money. Well, that's where we are in this story right now. We've just seen the world's central banks begin to really freak out. Europe's had negative interest rates for a while, but Japan just did it. And when Japan moved to negative interest rates, that seemed to be a catalyst for a lot of big money thinking, by which I mean big banks in particular, thinking, hey, this really doesn't work. Now, the Japanese stock market vaulted on that because, hey, the central banks were doing something, and we all know the markets love it whenever the central bankers say they're going to do something or do something. But what part of the Japanese stock market didn't like that was the Japanese banks. They got crushed and continue to get crushed because guess what? Taking banks and forcing them to accept negative interest rates makes them lose money. And when banks lose money, people don't want to hold the stocks. But it's more than that. In Europe, we're seeing incredible difficulties in the banking sector over there right now, with a number of big name headline banks over there, and not least of which, part of the reason people don't want to be holding the stocks of these companies, these banks in Europe, is because of the enshrined bail-in procedures that exist over there. Now, in a bail-in procedure, if you are an equity holder in a big bank and it gets in trouble, your equity either gets written off to zero or gets heavily diluted because they take all the bondholders and convert them into equity holders, which makes your holding worth a lot less in a bank that's fundamentally been catastrophically devalued anyway. So guess what? People are saying, rather not hold that stock. And they're also saying increasingly, and this is intelligent, I'd rather not hold my money in that bank either. So they're buying government bonds, which are having negative yields, right? German 2-year bonds at minus 0.56% or something like that right now. I mean, really, people are choosing to lose money or to pay the government for the option of loaning money to the government, because the alternative is to have your money in a banking system that increasingly is showing massive signs of distress. And we all know that the system is gearing itself up to take that money away. And we're seeing this all over the world right now with calls to ban cash. Why do we want to ban cash all over the world? Not because of terrorists, not because of drug runners, not because of any of that stuff. Trust me, the U.S. government's been totally fine with cash and drug running for a very long time without any problems. The reason we want to talk about moving away from cash is simply so that if nobody has cash and your bank decides to start charging you negative interest rates, the longer you leave your money in the bank, the more it goes down. How could you defend yourself from that? Easy, you take cash out. So obviously cash is the new enemy, but it's just the enemy of these crazy, insane central bankers who are literally flailing around doing crazy stuff. And guess what? The big banks have started to fight and rebel against that. The equity markets are rebelling against that. This is the sort of tension I've been looking for to bring a draw to this part of the story. In one way that this story could get drawn to a close is to have a giant market crash. So that's the alert I just put out. If you want to come and read it, that'd be fantastic. I'm alerting people because an alert for me means something has happened in the world that causes me to personally take additional actions in my own life to become more prepared. If I've let, in my case, any of my extensive preparations run down, or I've used stuff up and forgot to replace it, or there are things in my basement that are at the end of their life cycle and I need to replace them, or I just need to order my seeds for next spring. These are the things I am attending to right now, so that's why I wrote the alert. With that, subscribe to this channel if you haven't. Love to see you at the site. Lots of extremely important, fascinating, interesting, a little bit frightening things going on in the world today. So with that, I'm Chris Martenson. I'll see you next time.